All right, tribe, welcome back. Welcome to another episode of the In Full Bloom Book Club. Here we utilize the transformative power of storytelling to explore perspectives and to cultivate empathy, compassion, and connection. So our season theme is collective grief/trauma. Our season question is, how does trauma shape us? What consequences of collective trauma are we facing today? And how can we support one another in navigating collective grief? The book that we are currently reading is Riding the Lightning, A Year in the Life of a New York City Paramedic by Anthony Almojera. Physical and digital book purchase options are in the description box below. So in this episode, this is part 2. We are covering chapters 9 through 12. Mind you, there are lots of spoilers, so if you haven't finished reading, go ahead and go back, read the chapters, and come back and join us. And make sure you've been following along with all the other episodes for this book. And if you enjoy this kind of content and value what we're doing, it would be amazing if you could show your support by going ahead and liking this video, commenting in the comment section below with answers to our questions or anything else you'd like to say, and subscribe and turn on your notification bells to know when we post more videos.
Our first question. On page 204, Almojera talks about his experience performing in a reading of Sophocles' Ajax. This reading was produced by Theatre of War, a project by Brian Dories that provides translations of Greek tragedies to individuals suffering trauma. Almojera talks about how he resonated with the anger and pain the character Ajax experienced and connected with his sense of injustice. Consider the role art plays in helping people navigate trauma. What are your experiences with this? How can we use this understanding to inform how we traverse collective trauma and grief?
So immediately, it reminds me of a show I worked on called Echoes in college. Basically, as we were going through rehearsals, we were writing the play itself. It was kind of based on For Colored Girls. There we go. And we kind of used that same format, and it was super powerful. Each character was experiencing some sort of trauma. It was an all female cast. And I just remember the storyline, the different characters and different stories, and how impactful the performances were. And immediately I think about how art in its many forms, it's a matter of taking our experiences and transmuting that energy into something else. So whether it's pain, it's trauma, it's happiness, whatever it is, whatever those emotions are, whatever those experiences are, you're transmuting that energy. And I just think about the fact that if it weren't for art, what other ways would be able to express these different feelings? And then also in just times of need, like when we experience hardship, a lot of times it's easier to ignore it or to suppress the things we're feeling. But ultimately, all we're doing is trapping the energy. And over time, that energy builds until it has this great potential. And whether that great potential turns into something, whether it's destructive or revitalization, it's important that we have an outlet, and art is such a powerful outlet for communicating those feelings and connecting with people who are also experiencing the same things. Sometimes we don't have the words for what it is we're experiencing in those dark moments, and sometimes seeing it displayed before you helps you resonate with that, and then also gives you a different understanding of how to navigate that yourself, and build a sense of community with others who are also going through the same thing and not feel alone. So those were some of my experiences throughout college of working on shows and stuff. I think it's so powerful when you see people come together to create, because it's just such a basic principle of life in general.
In terms of my experience with kind of how art has helped me navigate like grieving, maybe. I would say I remember like in a some of the things that come to mind. I have uh, when I watch a little bit of the show Euphoria. At one point, when I was in a depressive episode, I think I've told y'all. before that I tend to lean into my pain because that's like, why would you watch that when you're going
Mhm.
through something? But I haven't seen the entirety of the show or actually even like the first season, but I remember the way the writers and the actress Zendaya, like the way she captured depression to me, like so much reflected my experience. And even like the visual components, like how they filmed everything, um, it was shocking how accurate it felt. And I never know how to quite explain like why that mattered to me or why it like meant something to me because like I knew, okay, other people go through depression. I could imagine that other people were experiencing things similar to what I was experiencing. It didn't necessarily like comfort me to know that other people were dealing with depression too. It was just kind of like that sucks for them, it sucks for me, it sucks all together. So I
Mhm.
don't know what about like witnessing a reflection of my experience was so moving and felt so necessary and kind of is what I sought during those times, but it is. I also remember when I was really young, um, I was having kind of one of my first like really difficult like um bouts of like an existential crisis. And it was one that usually I felt like it would come and go like within like, a few hours at the most, but this was lasting for a few days. And I really just felt like my life is forever changed. I'll never be the same after this. And I remember there's a song called Breathe, Breathe 2 a.m. by, I want to say Anna Nalick or something like that. And what she was speaking to in that song really resonated with like how I was feeling of kind of the cycle of life and kind of to me what some of the apathy that I was experiencing as well as some of the fear about the unknown and the fear about the concept of eternity, like it really spoke to me. And
Mhm.
yeah, like something like I think I've said before on this channel, just like something about art just feels like reflective of the human experience, and I think something very powerful about it, and I don't really know quite what, but yeah. But I'll also say there's something to escapism as well, and how it allows us to go into a different world and step outside of our reality, which I think can be really powerful, and very necessary as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I kind of use art to deal with trauma a little bit differently, like kind of like how you were saying towards the tail end of of what you were saying that it can be used to escape.
Mhm.
Yeah, like I don't really think I use art to like unpack anything. I think I just will like watch a show or a movie to forget about what I'm going through. And um as far as what that says about kind of like collective trauma and grief, I mean, I would say that's a pretty common, I feel like that's a common way to deal with trauma and grief, like just
Mhm.
to use something else to escape. And when we think about like escapism, I think the idea is normally that you're going to like use a substance or something to escape. But I think that like increasingly people deal with their trauma by like consuming media and like art. Um, I can't really say if I think that's like a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, I haven't really thought that far into it yet, but I guess what it says is that people, not that they run from like their problems, but like sometimes it can be easier to just put things on the back burner
Mhm.
and just kind of survive in the meantime. And I think that's what a lot of people have to do, and especially in the context of like COVID-19, how we saw everybody on TikTok and doing various things. I think that kind of just represents that a lot of us are just trying to get by day to day. We don't really have time to unpack and fix things and whatnot. Just trying to have a few moments of like like respite from thinking about your trauma and stuff. I think
Mhm.
that's kind of what we do as a collective when there's like a traumatic situation.
Mhm. I agree, Elena. Ultimately, I think that's just the reality of like our society. We have to quickly, like you say, put things on the back burner and keep moving because we just live in such a fast paced society where we don't always find the time to slow down and deal with what's happening in the now. And then that's where a lot of like the times when it's just pent up and like the aggression and the anxiety, like those are like results of those things not being dealt with. But also to speak to what Tia was saying, I find that whenever you watch something that, like you were saying, Euphoria, when you were like having a depressed episode and you're watching that, I feel like there's some sort of release that happens whenever you witness something that for the most part, it was always within you. Like, it's something that's inside of you. Like, you're experiencing in your mind, or it's just in your space, but then you see it outward in, the world. And I feel like there's some sort of relief that ends up happening when it goes from your head to like your environment. Being like a theater major, and we're always consuming um, media that typically like, or at least like when I went to college, a lot of like the plays we put on was kind of like activism type theater plays, and it was just things that were it was like big topics, big things that we as a community needed to face. And so seeing it being represented instead of it being just in our heads all the time, it forced us to sit with it. It forced us to look at it face head on. And I don't know, there was, as much as it can bring discomfort, it was also comforting.
This novel accounts what will certainly be regarded as one of the most historic, culture shifting periods of time in the first quarter of this century. How do you imagine this book will be viewed from a historical perspective?
Well, I really like this question. I immediately was thinking about when I was in school and I was first introduced to the Diary of Anne Frank, and one, how powerful that book was, and just it being someone's own accounts of something that was happening. Um, and of course, like I'm sure when it's happening, when these events are happening and we're in it, we kind of forget that it's history in the making. So I'd be excited to see this book almost become part of like the reading list, or like something that schools have to cover whenever they go, whenever they start integrating, the COVID-19 pandemic into history, like the history books, whenever they start covering that. I think this would be such a really cool read for, younger generations to look at, and especially just because of their the perspectives it brings to the table.
I think that what's so like different about the way that this book is written is that it's almost like an inside point of view, like somebody that saw what emergencies were like before the pandemic and then in the beginning and then at the peak of it. And I think in terms of like a historical view, I think it'll just be it'll offer a lot of insight for just how like rapidly things escalated. Like I think that's the main thing about this book that I think could be of use to for generations that weren't, around during this time, just to really show them how intense it got in such a short amount of time and how devastating it was.
Mhm.
Yeah, what I was kind of alluding to earlier was it feels in some ways kind of like an expose, like um we're really like getting to the nitty gritty of some of the flaws in some of our um systems, and I really appreciate that, and for that reason and many others, I think was really powerful. I'd say one of my favorite parts of the novel is when Anthony kind of laid out how um, poorer communities were affected by the pandemic. And he laid out that, like, a lot of blue collar workers and essential workers, a lot of essential workers were people from poor communities, right? And so, whereas
Mhm.
people who were more white collar workers um, were able to maybe work remotely,
Mhm.
a lot of the poor communities didn't have that option, so they were more likely to be exposed to the virus. They were maybe didn't have the same like insurance, healthcare benefits as other individuals. They were more likely to have more people living in the home, more likely to have less rooms in the home, so less ability to like quarantine and things like that. Like when
Mhm.
he laid it out, it was just kind of like, wow, this is not something. I mean, obviously, we know that people, I think it's probably general knowledge that people who are poor have like longer or I'm sorry, shorter life expectancy, and that they have are more at risk for health. But when you just, I don't know if you consider the fact that any kind of crisis that we meet as a nation is going to impact poor communities more harshly, and we kind of understand the idea that someone's financial economic situation, something that we have as human beings have created, you know what I mean? If we really understand like how much that impacts people's existence, I don't know, it's just kind of like, wow, that really the way he laid it out, I think was just so poignant
Mhm.
and so raw, Um but as you were speaking about Elena, it wasn't just like facts and statistics and like, this is what's happening, but um it really allowed you to peek into like how it's actually affecting like real people, people that look like you, people that um talk like you, people who you can connect with in some way. And also having it be, how do I explain? I mean, like, New York is the home of like Ellis Island, you know what I mean? It was kind of in some ways kind of what we view as the melting pot that is America, the culmination of these different cultures. Like it feels like that almost started in New York, you know what I mean? Or the New York is the center of that. When people think about America, they think about New York, right? And so I think something about it being because of just the fact that he happened to be there and he chose to tell the story, it being centered in New York also speaks to so many different people from so many different cultures, from so many different backgrounds. And his particular story speaks to so many people from so many different backgrounds. So I agree, Asia, that I can definitely imagine this being kind of considered a historic take, a historic like memoir of this particular period. And yeah, I'm just really, really grateful to have had the opportunity to really dive into this book, to really dive into this book and reflect on it. And yeah, get to know this incredibly brave individual through this narrative.
All right, so that is all we have for this episode, and for this book, actually. So, thank you all so much for joining and sticking around through the entire read of that book. Again, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel, and let us know what you thought about this book, and engage with us so we can share more about our own experiences with the story and what you thought about the story as well. Also, stick around for more information about our charities that our community are supporting this season. And please join us for the next episode. Also, speaking of, we have a really big surprise. So, in our very next episode, we will be interviewing the one and only Anthony Almojera, who is the author, obviously, of the book. So, we're really excited about that. So, please stick around for the next episode where we talk with him and just completely recount the moments of the story, and then also just dig deep into collective trauma and grief from his own perspective and our own, share our own perspectives on it as well. So please join us next time. There's always room for you here. Journey well.
Hey Tribe, before you go, we wanted to chat with you about how you can help your fellow humans navigate collective grief and trauma. This season, each host has chosen a charity to share with you all. The charities we've selected have missions that address collective grief or trauma in some way. Our hope is that you'll find a charity whose mission aligns with your hopes for humanity.
You can check the description box for links to our fundraising pages. We encourage you all to explore the websites for information about each organization's impact and ensure you're making an informed decision when giving. InfoBlue Media has no affiliation with any of these charities or crowdfunding platforms. Thank you all for your consideration.
Journey well.